You know that classic tech commercial trope? Like someone
Yeah.
is running through a torrential downpour, or they accidentally drop their high-end smartphone into a swimming pool.
Oh, yeah, and then they fish it out, wipe it off, and it works
Oh,
perfectly.
right. It looks like a magic trick. I mean, we are just so heavily conditioned to look at that sleek little device as this, impenetrable, invisible fortress,
Well, we really like the idea of absolute protection. I mean, we want to believe the word waterproof means exactly what it sounds like, a permanent shield against the elements.
which it isn't, right?
No, not at all. The physical world is entirely too chaotic for a word like that to hold any real scientific weight. In the actual engineering world, waterproof is purely a marketing buzzword.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Welcome to this deep dive. Today's mission is to explore the hidden, highly structured world of ingress protection ratings. That's the IP code you see stamped on all your gadgets and industrial equipment.
Yeah, and our source material today is this incredibly detailed technical report on how these standards work. Specifically, we're looking at IP65 through IP68 under the IEC 60529 testing framework.
Which dictates the absolute survival of these sensors. We are going to see how these ratings serve as the vital foundation for digital twins, helping those complex virtual simulations predict the physical future.
Because the stakes in those industrial environments are incredibly high. Our goal today is to cut through those vague marketing promises and understand the precise, sometimes brutal engineering behind these ratings.
Right. Like, what does it actually take to protect sensitive electronics in harsh environments? And why is simulating that protection the secret sauce of reliable predictive modeling?
Exactly.
So whether you are an engineer planning a massive automated factory deployment, or you are just someone wondering what the IP rating on your smartwatch actually guarantees, understanding this code completely changes how you view everyday technology.
It really does. It reveals this fascinating, invisible battle between cutting-edge hardware and the destructive forces of nature.
And nature is relentless.
It is. And to understand how engineers fight back and how digital twins simulate that fight, we have to start with the foundational language used to measure a device's physical vulnerability. We have to decode the actual structure of the IP code itself.
Right, so the IEC 60529 standard dictates a two-digit structure. It's IP followed by two numbers. Think of the IP code like two bouncers working the door at a club.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, so the first bouncer, that first digit, is strictly checking IDs for solid gate crashers. We're talking dust, dirt, sand, or even someone's fingers. That scale goes from 0 to 6.
And then the second bouncer.
Exactly. The second digit is looking out for liquid troublemakers. That scale goes from 0 to 9. The higher their numbers, the stricter the door policy.
And occasionally you will see optional letters appended to the end, like A, B, C, or D.
What do those mean?
Those denote specific protection against a person accessing hazardous live electrical parts inside the enclosure.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
But the core analysis always relies on those two main digits. They replace the ambiguity of a brochure claiming something is, highly water resistant with a repeatable, globally recognized framework.
Let's look at the most common ratings we see in these harsh environments. If an enclosure is rated IP65, that first digit is a 6, meaning it is completely dust-tight. That first bouncer is letting absolutely zero solids in.
Right. And the second digit is a 5, which means it's protected from low-pressure water jets from any direction.
So a rating like that is perfectly suited for, like, an outdoor sensor that might experience heavy rain or a light spray, but it won't ever find itself actually submerged under standing water.
Exactly. Now, stepping up to IP67, we keep that dust-tight 6, but the 7 means it is protected against temporary immersion in water.
Specifically up to 1 meter deep for about 30 minutes, right?
Right. And this creates an apples-to-apples comparison for procurement. If an engineer is sourcing 100 sensors from 3 different global vendors for a new deployment, the IP standard gives them a universal mathematical language of survival.
So they don't have to guess if vendor A's version of waterproof matches vendor B's water resistant.
Precisely.
The sources also detail a specialized rating, IP69K. And this one isn't necessarily a step up in submersion depth from IP68, but rather a completely different kind of environmental stress.
Yeah, that one is intense. It denotes protection against high-pressure, high-temperature washdowns. You see this constantly in food processing plants, where equipment is blasted with scalding water and corrosive chemicals just to sanitize the assembly line.
Wow. So it emphasizes resistance to aggressive, localized kinetic force and thermal shock.
Right, because a sensor might survive sitting at the bottom of a pond for a day, but completely shatter when hit by a 176-degree Fahrenheit jet of pressurized water.
That makes total sense. So knowing what the code means brings us to the next logical phase, like how manufacturers actually prove their sensors are up to the task.
This is the fun part. Earning those high numbers requires the devices to survive what is essentially a highly controlled torture chamber. The testing methodologies defined by the IEC standard are incredibly aggressive.
Yeah, the dust testing for an IP6X rating is a prime example of active sabotage. The device is placed into a specialized dust chamber, but the lab doesn't just let talcum powder settle on it passively.
No, they apply a vacuum differential of about 2 kilopascals to the inside of the enclosure.
They're literally trying to suck the fine, circulating dust into any potential leakage path. Every gasket, every seal, every cable gland is being actively compromised by a vacuum.
And if the mechanical structure holds under that negative pressure, it earns the 6.
That's wild. And the water testing applies a similar level of sheer physical stress.
Oh, absolutely. To pass IP66, which is protection against powerful water jets, a sensor is blasted with a half-inch nozzle from about 3 yards away.
And the lab pumps 26.4 gallons of water per minute at 100 kilopascals of pressure for at least 3 minutes.
Yeah, 26 gallons a minute is basically taking a fire hose to a piece of delicate electronics.
The mechanical force of that water alone could warp a poorly designed plastic enclosure, entirely separate from the moisture just trying to seep inside.
Which brings us to the IP68 standard, which is for continuous immersion beyond 1 meter.
Right. And this one genuinely surprised me in the sources. IP68 sounds like the ultimate invincible gold standard. But the exact depth and duration for IP68 are not universally mandated by the IEC 60529 standard.
No, they aren't. The manufacturer and the user actually get to define the agreement.
That is so strange, because continuous immersion is vastly different if a sensor is dropped into a 2-meter deep municipal water tank versus being anchored to the bottom of the Mariana Trench.
Exactly. The physics of hydrostatic pressure change exponentially.
Wait a second, though. So IP68, which sounds like the ultimate gold standard, is basically a choose-your-own-adventure rating. Doesn't that create a massive gray area if the manufacturer gets to set their own test conditions?
This raises an important question about the limitations of generalized standards. But it isn't a loophole. It's really a structural necessity of extreme engineering.
How so?
Well, the standard dictates that IP68 must simply exceed the IP67 baseline, which is 1 meter for 30 minutes. Beyond that, the physics dictate that you cannot engineer a universal housing for all depths without making the device prohibitively expensive and massive.
Oh, I see. So you can't just buy an off-the-shelf IP68 sensor and assume it works anywhere.
Right. The supply chain manager and the digital twin they are programming must manually verify and input the specific contractually defined parameters for every single component. Vendor A's IP68 might mean 2 meters for 24 hours, while vendor B's might mean 50 meters for a year.
So you really have to read the fine print and input that specific data. Okay, so a sensor survives the dust vacuum, it survives the fire hose, it gets its IP rating, and it gets deployed. But lab conditions don't always perfectly mirror the complexities of a real factory floor.
Not at all. The physical world introduces variables that the IEC standard struggles to fully encapsulate. A major point of failure actually occurs in the disparity between testing and deployment.
Yeah, the sources mention this. In early testing stages, manufacturers often use hollow shells, just empty enclosures, to test their seals.
Right. It saves the cost of ruining expensive electronics if a seal fails.
But testing an empty sensor shell is like testing a winter coat on a plastic mannequin instead of a person running a marathon. The mannequin doesn't sweat, breathe, or generate internal heat. It completely misses the internal thermodynamics.
Exactly. That's why for final certification, the standard demands populated enclosures, meaning the live electronics are functioning inside. Active components generate heat. That heat displaces air, increasing internal pressure.
And when the sensor inevitably cools down, the air contracts, creating a slight microvacuum inside the housing.
Yes. And that vacuum actively tries to suck outside air and moisture back through the seals.
This constant thermal cycling fundamentally changes how materials like silicone, MBR, EPDM, O-rings perform over time. They stretch, they compress, they degrade.
And the sources highlight a terrifying catalyst for this thermal degradation: dust.
Yeah, this was the most shocking statistic from the sources. A mere 2-millimeter layer of dust on an enclosure can reduce a sensor's heat dissipation by 40 to 60%.
Dust acts as an incredibly efficient insulating blanket.
Over half of the device's cooling ability vanishes because of a microscopic layer of dirt. So the internal heat spikes, exacerbating that thermal cycling we just talked about.
The vacuum effect becomes more severe, pulling harder on the aging seals. The report notes this vicious cycle can shrink a component's useful life from decades down to just years.
Furthermore, dust acts as a moisture reservoir. It traps ambient humidity directly against the metal or plastic housing, fostering accelerated corrosion.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals why enclosure design is an extreme balancing act. Engineers must balance dust mitigation, which requires impenetrable seals, against thermal management, which often benefits from venting or porous heat sinks.
Because if you seal a box completely tight, you trap the internal heat. But if you build intricate heat sinks, you create crevices where dust and moisture accumulate.
Right. And even if an engineer designs the thermodynamically perfect box, it still has to be plugged into the network. Touchscreens have removed many physical buttons, making cables and external connectors the last bastion for contaminants to enter.
Yeah, a cable port is an open doorway to the fragile interior.
A system can feature the most robust EPDM gaskets available, but if a technician doesn't screw a connector cap on perfectly straight, or if a UV-exposed cable boot becomes brittle and cracks, the integrity of the entire enclosure is compromised.
I know some manufacturers utilize internal nano coatings on the circuit boards to repel water, but the standard classifies those strictly as secondary protection, right?
Correct. They do not replace structural mechanical sealing.
Which brings us to the core application of all this data. We have this hostile, dirty, fluctuating physical world, and these tiny sensors trying to survive in it. This is why complex systems rely on digital twins.
Exactly. To accurately anticipate failures, the twin simulation must deeply integrate the specific IQ ratings and the physical realities of thermal cycling we just discussed.
So a digital twin is this live, physics-based simulation fed by real-time data from the physical system. And the IP rating sets the mathematical boundary conditions within that simulation.
Right. If a twin knows a sensor on a volatile chemical pipe is rated IP67, it establishes a hard operational envelope. Its algorithms know the component can survive a 30-minute accidental submersion, but will critically fail at minute 31.
But wait, how does the software actually model the slow, physical degradation of an O-ring? A digital twin can't physically see a microcrack forming in a silicone seal.
No, it models degradation by monitoring secondary indicators and cross-referencing them with known physical laws.
Give me an example. Let's take the dust issue.
Sure. So the twin receives continuous temperature data from thermal sensors inside the physical device. The simulation knows the baseline operating temperature for that component. If the internal temperature slowly climbs by 5 degrees over a month, but the computational workload of the sensor hasn't changed, the mathematical model deduces that thermal dissipation is failing.
And then the software correlates the rising heat with ambient environmental data, like the particulate levels on a dusty factory floor, and mathematically calculates that a 2-millimeter dust layer has formed on the housing.
Yes, and it goes deeper into the physics. The twin tracks the exact thermal cycling of that specific sensor.
So every time the machine powers down for a shift change and the sensor cools, the twin uses the ideal gas law to calculate the strength of the microvacuum created inside the enclosure.
Exactly. It estimates, based on the age and material properties of the EPDM gasket, how many micrograms of moisture-laden air are being pulled past the seal during each cooling phase.
Wow. So over a year of thermal cycles, the simulation predicts exactly when the internal humidity will reach the dew point, causing water to condense directly onto the circuit board.
And before catastrophic short-circuiting occurs, that moisture bridges microscopic electrical pathways. This alters the electrical resistance just enough to cause a tiny shift in voltage or a microsecond of data lag.
So the twin detects these minuscule anomalies in the sensor's output and identifies them as calibration drift caused by moisture ingress.
That's the meta layer of digital twins. The digital twin must represent these ingress-related faults, like water ingress or dust buildup, as specific events or health indicators, ensuring that the entire ecosystem doesn't collapse just because a single gasket failed.
So a digital twin isn't just modeling the giant machine or the factory process, it's actually simulating the degradation of the tiny box holding its own sensors. It has to anticipate its own sensory failure.
It absolutely has to. If an automated assembly line relies on hundreds of network sensors, the digital twin differentiates between a mechanical failure of the giant factory machine it's monitoring and a microscopic breach in its own sensory organs.
And this data feeds directly into predictive maintenance dashboards.
Yes. Instead of a red light flashing because a sensor just short-circuited and halted production, which costs massive amounts of money, the twin intervenes early. It flags the specific physical variable.
So it outputs a directive like uh, gasket failure on sensor B imminent due to thermal cycling, replace O-ring, and wipe down enclosure to restore thermal dissipation.
Exactly. By integrating the granular test data of the IEC 60529 standard into the physics engine of the simulation, facilities shift from reactive emergency repairs to proactive scheduled maintenance.
The twin isn't just guessing how long a part will last. It is calculating a mathematically grounded timeline of survival based on the specific torture tests that device passed in the lab.
It really highlights how reliant our advanced software systems are on the fundamental mechanical engineering of physical seals and thermal management.
So whether you are a plant manager overseeing a massive industrial deployment, or you are researching the specs on a new piece of consumer tech, you now know to check the fine print behind the IP rating.
You understand the immense invisible engineering effort required to keep the dust out and the data flowing. The difference between a 5 and a 7 on that IP code dictates a completely different reality of testing, pressure, and thermal survival.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought about the trajectory of this technology. We've explored how digital twins simulate the slow degradation of an IP-rated seal based on real-time environmental exposure, alerting a human to intervene. But since digital twins are becoming advanced enough to simulate that slow degradation, could we soon see systems that dynamically alter their physical environment to protect themselves?
Oh, like a fully closed-loop system of environmental self-preservation.
Exactly. Imagine a digital twin that realizes a critical sensor's IP67 seal is aging, and its thermal dissipation is dropping due to ambient conditions. Instead of generating a maintenance ticket, the twin autonomously instructs the physical factory's HVAC system to lower the ambient humidity and temperature in that specific sector.
Wow. Or it triggers a robotic arm to deploy a physical shield over the vulnerable sensor before a high-pressure washdown cycle occurs. The machines wouldn't just endure their environments, they would actively negotiate with them to survive.
It represents a shift from predictive modeling to active environmental manipulation. The simulation wouldn't just predict the future, it would physically change the parameters of the room to alter the timeline of degradation.
That is a fascinating concept.
And it all traces back to those two little numbers stamped on the side of the box. So the next time you see an advertisement showcasing a piece of technology shrugging off a torrential downpour, remember the science operating beneath the surface.
There are no invisible fortresses.
There are only carefully calculated thresholds of pressure, the relentless reality of thermodynamics, and the incredible engineering required to keep the water at bay for just a little bit longer. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.